So this summer filled with lots of different sports continues within the world of football as we have the Euros that are just underway, and so far it's been pretty good. And in this video we're going to break down some of the psychological elements for this international tournament. We're going to look at historically what have been some sports psychology areas which have been important for the champions, and what could be some predictions for some psychological elements very important for the potential winner of this Euros. So when we think about the Euros and just international tournaments in general, they are really interesting, like when you start to break them down. We can see, of course, the team that's been put together typically is the best talent that country has to offer, and they're put together in that team to try and win the trophy. But a lot of the times when we're looking at this talent, it's typically from a technical point of view. Then of course the international coach comes together and they work with the team, and then they devise the tactics to then help that team win. But even though these technical and tactical elements are important, the psychological element is also really interesting when you just think about the dynamics of each team. So when you think about any international tournament, every country apart from one is basically playing an away game in every single match, and so that's a mental component that could be important for their performance. Also, when you think about how each team is constructed, a lot of times these players who are now on the international team, a month or two ago, the teammates that they have now were those rivals a month or two ago when they were playing for their clubs. And then in combination of those two mental areas, you've got the pressure of your whole nation for you to win this trophy and then of course bring it back to the country. And so a lot of these international teams have a lot of pressure, and a lot of psychological components really impact whether they're going to be successful, make a deep run within the tournament, or if they're going to crash out and just lose very quickly. And so the psychological element of all these teams are really important, and that's not just a case for this Euros and a lot of those teams who are favoured to win, but also historically when we look at a lot of the different champions in the past couple of years, there's always been a really key psychological element that's helped them to then win that tournament. So for example, when we think about Italy, who recently won, although it pains me to say, they did do very well when we look at the psychological element of mental toughness. So they were able to maintain their composure, they were able to play their game, especially thinking about the circumstances in which they played. They're playing in England. England are in the final as well, and they conceded a goal early in the game. And so all those components really didn't go in their favour, but they were able to maintain their ability to produce their performance, have heightened levels of mental toughness, and then they ultimately won the game in penalties. Unfortunately, even if we look a bit further back, we can see in 2016 when Portugal won the Euros, we can see that Ronaldo of course was playing on the team, and whenever you think about Ronaldo and Portugal, we kind of assume that Portugal are only going to be dominant if Ronaldo is playing. And so Portugal of course got to the final, but Ronaldo wasn't able to play. And so a psychological element that Portugal really showed in that situation was team resilience, that ability to bounce back from adversity, to adjust to the situations that they were kind of given, and being able to produce a great performance that ultimately helped them to win the trophy. And then even going further back in 2012, Spain were the champions for the Euros, and we can see in that dominant era that they had, they were highly favoured to win that tournament. And so the pressure that they had, not only for their country for them to win, but then also in the media kind of saying that it's inevitable that they're going to win, they had a lot of pressure coming into that tournament. And so the psychological area of pressure management, using lots of different psychological skills and self-regulation skills to enable them to actually produce that performance on a consistent basis to then reach this goal, was something that they showed in that tournament. And so within these three champions, we can just see a constant theme of all of them in one way or another had a challenge, had a setback, had some form of adversity. And yes, they had amazing talent, they had amazing techniques, and they had really good tactics, but they also had a psychological psychological element that really helped them to actually hoist that trophy at the end. And so in addition to the tactical and technical side, the psychological elements coming into an international tournament are really important, and that could be a deciding factor for what team ultimately wins the trophy. And so thinking about these Euros now that they're underway, I think there's two real key psychological areas that are really important and that could be a deciding factor for who eventually wins the trophy. I think that first one is pressure management. As you progress in the tournament, more and more pressure gets mounted on you. So of course you've got your nation that are from the get-go always wanting you to win every match and dominate. But then as there's fewer and fewer teams as you progress, the media now start to put more emphasis on their predictions on matches. Maybe if you play bad but your team wins, going into that next match, there could be some pressure on individual players. So athletes' ability to manage that pressure and produce that performance that they've seen throughout the season is something that's going to be really important, especially when you get to those quarterfinals, semi-finals, and then of course the final. So I feel like that's a very important psychological element, and that could be helped off with the tactical side. So maybe coaches putting their players in good positions to score or get good positions. It could be done through, of course, the techniques that the players can use, and being able to use those techniques of scoring, great positioning, etc., to then score those goals or put their teammates in good positions. But then also there's those psychological elements. So the things that you're saying to yourself, what are you visualizing, how are you preparing for your matches? All of these different elements are going to help with pressure management. And so that's going to be a real key psychological area to think about. I think another really key psychological area is going to be role clarity. Yes, that has some tactical elements to it, but then it also has some psychological elements to it as well. So when we think about role clarity, we need to make sure, or as a coach, you need to make sure that every single teammate knows exactly what is required of them in each match. A lot of these players are going to be superstars within their own clubs, and so coming into this team, they're going to have to make some sacrifices or some adjustments to how they typically played within their club. And so having that role clarity is going to be very important to make sure that everyone is doing everything that they need to do to put their team in the best situation to win the match. So those are two elements, both tactically but also mentally, can be very important in deciding these who's going to eventually win. And so my predictions for these Euros, I'm probably a bit biased, but I really believe that England will win the Euros this year. I think they have a deep squad in each position. I feel like they've gone through a lot of adversity, and just thinking about that from a mental standpoint, with heightened levels of adversity from previous experiences, that could then boost confidence and boost players' belief in their ability now in this situation, having grown and developed from previous experiences in the Euros and coming so close to winning it in last time. I think having gone through that adversity, their levels of being able to manage pressure is a psychological element they're going to do very strong at. I think one thing that could be very challenging with them is role clarity, because again, England have a lot of really good players, and some of these players play in certain positions, but then they also do a lot for their clubs. And so coming into the international tournament, it could be very tricky for some players to kind of adjust to their role, maybe having a reduced role or having been expected to do certain other things. And so having that mental switch of going into that international tournament could be something that's challenging for England. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. Who have you got winning the Euros? Is it coming home to England? Is it going to go to Germany? They're also favoured as well. Is it going to France, who have been dominant in international tournaments over the last couple of years? Let me know. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.